It's the final word with me and him, Wisdom Cricketer's Almanac, a book that we are always happy to be published in, be it things we've written. I wrote the essay on Dan Worrell in this year's edition of the Good Book. We were reviewed very kindly in there. We were described as, I can't remember what they said. I remember it was by far the best cricket pod was one year, and I think this year was remains the gold. That's what it was. Remains the gold standard of cricketing podcasts, which, you know, that's a lovely thing to have in print in the little yellow Bible of the game. And if you are the type of person who is into the almanac, then do never subject yourself to paying full price for it. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Wisdomsalmanac.com/subscribe. Pretty easy to remember. Wisdomsalmanac.com/subscribe, although there is a link in our notes. You get 50% off the recommended retail price. And then that's just an ongoing thing forever. You get the book for half price year on year for being a subscriber. And you don't want to be one of these people with a couple of wisdoms. You want to, collect the set. It's like footy stickers or footy cards. You didn't get the footy sticker book and leave out David Kernahan because you already had the Stephen Kernahan sticker.
You didn't, when you got your basketball cards in 1994, you didn't leave out Shaquille O'Neal.
No, you get them all.
I can't remember which team he would have been.
I remember well. I used to love the descriptions on the footy club.
He played for Charlotte Hornets.
He played for lots of teams. He played Orlando Magic was where Shaq initially burst onto the scene, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I didn't. I remember those footy cards would have interesting descriptions on the back, and the word utility and the type of player who would be dubbed a utility. I remember
Southern.
I remember well. My friend and now the president of the Hawthorn Football Club, Andy Gowers, beautiful man, was described on the back of his footy card in 1993 as a utility. And a utility he was, and a utility he is to the Hawthorn Football Club. Why are we saying this?
Different to Monopoly utilities, where you've got the power, you've got the water, whatever the other ones are. They didn't have high-speed broadband at that stage. The point is,
subscribe to the Good Book.
You get a massive book, and they're expensive because they're massive, and they could be much less expensive if you subscribe to it, and then you give Wisdom the surety of knowing that they've got this many subscribers to service, and that helps the whole enterprise go around. That's why they give you the discount.
And it remains that independent voice as well, as evidenced by what Lawrence does in the editor's notes each year, and a bunch of other perks as well, which you can find when you go to wisdomalmanac.com/subscribe. Jeff, we have loads more to get through in this second segment. Let's start in the Windies, though, which is where Australia's men go after the WTC final. That acronym, WTC, I feel like I have to say it so many times every day. Roston Chase will be waiting for
is a terrible letter to have in an acronym. Although the people who get cross about acronyms will say it's not an acronym, it's an initialism because it doesn't make a word. But W has too many syllables to be shortened. You might as well just say the word. There are a few words that start with W that will be longer than saying W.
Well, with WTC specifically,
World Wide Web is 3 syllables. WWW is 9 syllables. It's a bad ratio. It's a bad exchange rate.
There were bad omens with WTC. I mean, I think we've statute of limitations with the WTC being the World Trade Center, wasn't it? That's what they were known that way in shorthand when they were there.
Or as Ben Stokes calls it, the WTF.
Yeah, probably. We'll talk about Stokes in a bit. So the Windies have a new captain. That'll be the start of the next WTC cycle when Australia play in Barbados, Grenada, and Jamaica. Like Roston Chase hasn't played Test cricket for like nearly 2 years. He's missed the last 13 matches, but he won a competitive process. They interviewed them all. They didn't want to do it on the fly. Having had such a long-term captain in Craig Brathwaite, he did a pretty good job, all things considered. They wanted to get the right person. Shai Hope was expected to get the gig, but he ruled himself out. So Roston Chase will play his 50th Test match against Australia in his first as captain on his home ground at Barbados. And his vice-captain, Jamal Warricane, who we've taken a great interest in the career of from back when we first were covering the Windies in 2015, and he gets the chance now to take a formal leadership role as the number 2.
The man the authorities came to blame, was he on debut at Hobart?
No, he played in 2015.
1 or 2, hadn't he?
He was in. I reckon his debut was the first Test that I did on radio. I reckon he debuted at Dominica in 2015.
It was early days. It might have been his first overseas trip. Yeah, in any case, Craig with 2 Gs, Craig Brathwaite has. I think he has done well with what he's had, with limited opportunities, limited resources. They've had their moments under him. Is he still playing, or has he's just decided that he's tired of being in charge?
Senior pro. By the way, Warwick didn't play that test. He played the West Indies. I remember now. He played the West Indies Board 11 game the week before, which I also covered at Antigua, which was my absolute first thing I'd done away from home. So that generation of cricketers I still remember very fondly. But yeah, Brathwaite will be there. And yes, we know from some more reporting a couple of weeks ago that it now does look like Jamaica will be a day-nighter. So it was going to be, then it was not going to be, and now it's going to be.
It wasn't. Okay.
We'll see how the lights hold up.
All right.
Hopefully well.
Nightlife in Kingston. Very good. The first Charlotte Edwards squad is out. Now, this is interesting. Maybe your finger's a little more on the pulse in England cricket terms than mine. So Sophie Ecclestone not in the squad. This sort of official line from England is that it's to manage a knee injury. There was so much stuff around Ecclestone and fitness over the Australian tour, and whether the attitude was quite sharp enough, and then the getting stroppy about being questioned about fitness and all of those sorts of things. Charlotte Edwards being a pretty stern sort. I don't know. Is there any through line there?
Well, she's played 3 games for Lancs. Like, she's playing. So she's injured. They're air quotes managing a knee injury. Like that, I say air quotes. That's what's in the communique.
Yeah.
She's the number one bowler in the world.
So they're managing it by having her play a different kind of cricket.
I think this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
I think I think Charlotte Edwards is making a statement, and good on her.
Making a statement.
Yeah, I think she's doing it in a subtle enough way. Yeah, who knows this comes down to if the women's team were covered the way the men's team are covered. This is the one gap in the way that the journalism works on women's cricket, in my opinion. There'll be other views out there. Because there are so many people covering every last detail of men's international cricket, you don't end up in situations where you and I are speculating. Someone's got the yarn by this point, and we know exactly what's happened. The women's game works a bit differently. A lot of us cover it and talk about the 22 yards in the middle, but there are fewer people covering the stories that surround the game and surround the team. So you don't end up with that competitive tension with the media, so you don't end up actually finding out necessarily. And if you wish, as a team, you can keep things closer in. So, but I mean, in the absence of any more information, all I'm seeing is Sophie Ecclestone was in the middle of all of this. She dominated at home last year, took her wickets at 9, wasn't it, at home, and they didn't lose a match in the home summer. And a lot's happened since then, both at the T20 World Cup and at the Women's Ashes. But she remains England's most important bowler by any metric, right? She was the Wisden Cricketer of the Year only a few weeks ago. I'm not saying that she's been dropped for her fitness. I'm not saying it expressly as that. But are they making a statement about the way that chapter ended under John Lewis? Possibly. It'll be interesting when Charlotte, because she'll give a straight answer, Lottie. That's the thing, right? So eventually we will learn more about this. And maybe not before this series begins. This series starts tomorrow. It begins on Wednesday at Canterbury. They've got, against the Windies, they've got 3 T20s quite quickly, then 3 one-days that follow. It's all over in the space of 2 weeks. So it's not the main series this summer either. They have India later on. There's a World Cup in September, October. There is loads of cricket. So providing Ecclestone the chance to rehab in a slower way playing domestic cricket, that it might be that as well. It might simply be that, but I'd be surprised.
Is the domestic schedule less intensive?
Yeah, true. They're playing heaps of cricket, as we'll go into later. There has been so much 50 over and 20 over cricket overlapping in those tier 1 teams right now, of which Lancashire is one.
If you're bowling in domestic cricket, it's not less hard work than bowling in international cricket. You might say, okay, there are short gaps between the international games. There's a day or two between them, and so that's a little that might be slightly more intensive. But
got a 50 as well the other day.
Much of a muchness, isn't it?
Yeah. In terms of those who actually will be playing, Paige Schofield, what a great story that is. She's at Surrey now, but long-term member of the Vipers under Lottie, and she's had a blinder with the England A team in Australia and totally earned her promotion to the main team. Yeah. So looking forward to seeing her get her chance in the T20 squad tomorrow. For the most part, it's as you would expect. Izzy Wong is back in the T20
that feels like
team.
Such a Charlotte Edwards pick too, just going, come on, you can't have a player with this much talent being this far out of the setup.
Agree. I think this is Edwards saying, it's Edwards very early on saying this is the type of team I want. I want battle-hardened pros like Paige Schofield, and I want raw talent that can be refined and turned into something special like Izzy Wong, having had a couple of quieter years and found herself not quite in the wilderness, but nowhere near as high profile as she was a couple of years earlier with selection. The squad evolves for the one-day team as well that Nat Sciver-Brunt will oversee. So we'll have more on that next week. But yeah, the Ecclestone story is absolutely one to follow. And I commend Ben Gardner, who wrote about this on wisdom.com the other day. It's not easy to write these pieces and to go into this stuff sometimes because the blowback can be considerable. And yeah, he put his head up there and let it be whacked. I'm not sure whether it has been whacked, but when you are writing yarns like that, it lends itself to scrutiny the other way as well. So have a look at that if you want to read more about the Ecclestone story as it is at the moment. Speaking of stories that have a long way to run, the latest in this India-Pakistan off-field, well, I was going to say off-field drama. I mean, it's far more than that. It's a simmering global friction point that could go any which way. So we know the players have returned. I mentioned before that Stark hasn't. No such concern for David Warner, who's gone straight back into the PSL. So that there are players over in Pakistan as well who had a pretty rugged return when they had to get out of there quickly on a chartered flight with lots of other people. But with both of those tournaments starting, the focus is cast forward, Jeff. So this is one for later in the year, but the BCCI have withdrawn their women's emerging team from the Asia Cup. Now, the Asia Cricket Council oversees the Asia Cup. Different story slightly from the ICC, but maybe a sign of things to come. And the tension here is that Moshe Naqvi, who is the chair of the PCB, has now been made president of the ACC. So in retaliation to that, the BCCI have said, fuck that, we want nothing to do with this. Remembering that Naqvi is also a minister. He's the interior minister. So he's up to his eyeballs in what's going on more broadly between the two countries. And the Asia Cup is in September. So that's for the men. So,
but this is happening in one of these classic BCCI ways. So it's being reported. So I think the Indian Express had the story initially that this has happened. The BCCI, meanwhile, is denying that this has happened and saying that no discussions have been had and no decisions have been made. Now, maybe no decisions have been made, but are you seriously trying to say that no discussions have been had about it over the last couple of weeks? So we've got the usual sort of run of obfuscation, and there's every chance that it comes out being the decision that's already been reported as having been taken, but there's a kind of just on principle refusing to confirm anything ever seems to be the approach for that board.
I said I'd mention more social media posts. So Jay Shah's post, which wouldn't be unusual in his previous role. We're seeing a lot of Instagram posting from Indian players around the armed forces. So what Jay Shah wrote was, the caption was, "Our armed forces are our pride, and no words are enough to express their valor and commitment in protecting our motherland and people. We salute our brave men and women in the armed forces who are shielding our nation from terrorism, and let us unite to honor our heroes and build a stronger, more united India." So yeah, it's punchy, the terrorism reference there as well. So yes, it's the same language that others are using, but where he's got into hot water, and he almost immediately deleted this message, is the ICC, which he oversees. He's not BCCI secretary anymore. He's the ICC chair, where there is an expectation that of neutrality. And we saw that play out, and Malcolm was all over this on social media with Usman Khawaja, and the refusal to let Usman Khawaja do any number of things around his shoes and around his bat and so on over the last summer and a half. Whereas Jay Shah, in a different context, is permitted to say that on social media. And again, it's a little bit of a reflection of the world that we're living in. There'll be no action on this. Nothing will actually tangibly change, but other than him deleting the post, that is. But it's another reminder of just how warped the world that we live in is as far as cricket governance, where that's just seen as, oh, that's a bit of a blip and he'll delete the post and we all move on, when if it were anywhere else, in any other situation, this would be a big, big deal.
It's a curious one that he had the thought that this would be a fine and reasonable thing to do, because obviously it's somebody's jumped on the blower and suggested that maybe this isn't a good idea, and clearly he's not put it up and then thought better of it himself. So he must have been spoken to by somebody who's pointed out the issue that you're running an international organisation that includes Pakistan as a member. So you can't be out there pumping up Indian patriotism in the same way as somebody with an overt political connection, which he supposedly doesn't have, despite being related to the government by 1 degree of separation. So that's the mystifying bit, I think, is that, and it speaks to the fact that, like, this is a young guy. This is the thing about nepotism, is that you get people in situations, in jobs that they don't have the life experience, the qualifications to actually do. He's had a rails run at every senior administrative post in his life, from the Gujarat Association through to the BCCI and now through to the ICC. And he's of an age where, he's probably just gone 35. So, he's eligible to run for US president on an age basis, where he was running the BCCI when he wasn't, where you're not considered to have the life experience to take big organisational control jobs like that. So it does speak to naivety and living in a cosseted, protected environment, that you would have the thought that this is an appropriate thing given my job and my position in world cricket to do.
Yeah, I had a similar thought. It's that lack of presence to realise that you are overseeing a federation, which includes a member of it being Pakistan, who this is targeted at.
Clearly
this message.
Pointed at, yeah.
Yeah, so, where's the upside, right, in him doing this, especially when the ICC are meant to remain neutral in political matters, as we discussed before in relation to Usman Khawaja and the brouhaha around that. And that was, nowhere near as inflammatory as what we're, seeing here. So, and I know this isn't on the field of play. It's not holding up a banner or something like that. And Khawaja's free to say whatever he wants outside of the field of play. But still, it was a worthy reference point from Malcon, which prompted a bit of coverage over the last few days. There wasn't quite so much coverage, although it did get screenshotted and sent around everywhere, of Pat Cummins reposting something along these lines as well in relation to the Indian Armed Forces, and all the other captains of the IPL were in this graphic, and Pat's sort of in the middle of it because he's one of the captains at Sunrisers Hyderabad, and he's on shared it. I'm not sure how that comes to pass, whether he was forced to do it, like whether it was an obligation as an IPL captain. It looked out of step with the way that Pat Cummins normally plays it. It was jarring. Like, oh, that's a bit odd. Cummins sharing something as punchy as that.
So I didn't see this. So it was an image.
It's an image embedded within the images. I haven't got the sentence in front of me, but it's similarly worded to what Jay Shah had above.
It's like implying that here are all the captains of the teams united in support.
That's right. That was the vibe of it. Like, we are in solidarity with the Indian Armed Forces, and all the other captains of the franchises this year are from India. So I get it. I'm not. This is probably more. This has popped up in Cummins' feed. I don't know. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe this was more strategic than how I'm playing it out. But it doesn't. You don't often see Cummins getting involved like that, because that would. He's been quite strategic about the things he's spoken about, and knows that he's going to cop an enormous amount of grief for it. Climate change, the obvious one. I haven't seen him, weigh in on Australian domestic political matters, for instance, because he knows if he were to do that, all hell would break loose. So
no, but there's a kind of manufactured neutrality. So when you've got conflict that's spilling over into real world conflict, and you've got two governments who are both being militaristic in their stance towards each other, they've got two militaries that are coming up against each other, even if in relatively limited ways, and you've got a couple of different types of action at times like this, or different types of speech. So you have the explicit warmongers who are out there saying, let's get over there and fuck them up, whoever the other side is, let's bomb this city or do this or do that. And then you have the people who go, well, we can't say that because that's a bit too explicit. So what we'll do instead, the coded version of that, the wink and a nudge version of that, is we've got to do the support the armed forces approach. And this isn't just an India thing or a Pakistan thing. This is just about any country. You see it in the US all the time. They're huge on all of the troops stuff, all of the respect the troops, all of the thank you for your service, all of that kind of stuff is a coded way of showing respect towards military might and towards the country's position as a force that can go and enforce its will elsewhere. That's the implication. So it's couched in this neutral way where someone like Cummins could go, well, I'm being polite here because I'm in this country, that I have to say, well, yeah, certainly I respect their soldiers, I respect their armed forces, but what are their armed forces there to do? What's the supposed outcome? And this is the same in any country, in any sort of conflict, where you get this it's weaselly. It's pretending to be neutral by just saying, "Oh, I'm just respecting the troops. That's all I'm doing." But there's a reason that you're choosing to make that very explicit statement.
The last bit of news out of Asia, Jeff, on today's show anyway, and this is less serious, far less serious in some respects. Mike Hesson has been appointed the new white ball coach of Pakistan. Good luck with that, mate. He's got a 2-year deal. Let's play the same game we played.
See you in November, Mike.
When's the next global tournament? So the Asia Cup, if it goes ahead, is in September. So there's
no way.
When's the next global tournament? There's a T20 World Cup for the men next year, presumably.
March-ish, March, I think.
It's India, Sri Lanka, isn't
it? India, Sri Lanka.
Yeah. So he will last till not a day after that. So he will go.
Yeah.
So I suppose
we'll see you on seek.com. Mike, around about late March next
That might
year.
work, actually. If it's about a 9-month deal, and it's provided he gets paid what he's been, provided it all works the way it's meant to work.
Which he won't. I'd be Pakistan pay up front if I'm taking a job with the PCB. I'm like full 100% of the contract now.
But I guess my point is it's not. It's a 2-year deal, and of course he won't serve 2 years. But like, if you know the next global tournament is then, it's improbable they're giving you the ass before the World Cup. So that is in some ways weirdly job security.
Wouldn't rule it out.
You wouldn't rule it out.
Gary Kirsten. He'll lose a one-day series to Bangladesh, and Gary Kirsten didn't even coach a game, did he?
Yeah, he lost the job before he coached a 50 over international, or maybe it was T20 or whatever it was. It was still pretty, So eyes on that for later in the year. Another bit of news. This is I guess adjacent to the IPL. So the ECB need to land these 100 deals, and I get it. If you've got something that's worth £525 million and that money is being invested back into the game, there is an urgency to it. But the ask is getting more advanced, according to reporting in the Sunday Times. So now it's about governance. Originally, it was going to be a board of 20 where the 4 ECB reps got 2 votes each. And now to provide a buffer, I suppose, on the will of the comp and so on. Now there
would still be 8 votes to 16, wouldn't it?
Right. But I mean, I guess there was a sense that would be sufficient to block anything that needed to happen. I think that's because to expand the tournament, it requires a 2/3 majority, something like that.
Right.
But now that it'll be one vote, one value, clumsy thing to say, 4 out of 20. So the ECB will be diluted in their influence about the way the 100 is administered more widely. Now, when we spoke to Richard Gould the other week, one of the questions I asked him was about how the comp might expand. I was talking more about the calendar, but a combination of the calendar and the size of the tournament, especially when you consider that from 2032 onwards, the TV rights to the 100 will be sold separately to the parcel of TV rights that they now have with everything wound in together. So I'm not sure what this all means eventually, but it does sort of provide a pathway to the 100 being bigger and different to how the ECB may wish it to be. But this is the thing with leverage. Like at the moment, the ECB just need this deal to work. And they always talk about a spirit of partnership and growing the game and these great relationships and so on. But ultimately, you've got one side of the relationship who really, really, really need this, and the other side of it who can, I suppose, in their negotiations, keep asking for more and more and more until the point where the dotted line is signed. So yeah, keep an eye on that.
It's an interesting, if you've got 4 votes versus 16, you need a 2/3. So if the franchises agree to expand, they can do it against the ECB's wishes.
It would kind of seem that way to me. I mean, maybe I'm reading this too simplistically.
That's how the numbers pan out.
It seems to me that they will have the ability to go, right, and it's where the expansion teams might be. Like, is it Durham? Is it Kent? Is it Somerset? With Bristol in the mixer? So they'll have some control over that. But
what about approvals to buy the teams? Who will they allow to do it? Where the ECB might have some qualms left about some of the potential suitors, where I'm guessing the rest of the franchises won't.
Yeah, so this is clearly complicated stuff, but it's the point I think here is that we're getting nearer and nearer to the time where they just need this deal to be done and need to put this in the rear vision mirror. Staying with England, we're not far away from our second break. There will be daily shows coming out this week, as we've talked about already. The cast that you've already gone through yourself, you'll do a day, Jeff. Norcross will do a couple. Cam will do a couple. Ben Jones will do a couple. It'll be nice and fun getting the band back together for those. We'll be mostly in Edinburgh, which is why we can't do them ourselves. Ben Stokes will be in that England team. He looks fit as a fiddle. All the photos of him look great. He's been away 5 months since the last hammy tear in New Zealand. Remember they rushed it last year to get him back and it didn't work and he re-injured his hamstring again. But he's talking last week on Sky. It was quite an interesting interview around, wanting to be the fourth bowler and bat number 6. He might be 33, but he's not willing to concede that he would have to play as a batter only. So that's the objective. And he's added to this that he's off the piss. He's not had a drop of booze since the 2nd of Jan. He did a podcast the other day around this separate to the Sky interview. He acknowledges in it that he has a historical problem with booze. No shit.
Yeah, no shit.
And now, I mean, you could be cynical here and say that
he's historical problem with punching people in the head too, but he doesn't seem so keen to address that.
Yeah, I mean, he's got himself lined up with a booze-free beer commercially as well. So, I mean,
that's a bit convenient.
Don't get me wrong. We're easily, if a booze-free beer wants to work with us, we'll go have the piss for a couple of months.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we don't have a historical problem of landing in court for on charges of arising from the aforementioned.
But yeah, so Stokes will play. The other part of that interview was it was a bit of doth protest too much on the golf thing. He really fired up about the golf thing on Sky. I think because they're so pissed at KP. So Peterson's stuff about them not training in favour of playing golf. And as Izzy Westbury noted on Instagram, a bit of Streisand effect going on here. Like the more that we are talking about golf, the more we are talking about golf, right? Like by saying that it's not a thing, it just simply amplifies the proposition to begin with.
Yeah, and if your coach is sitting on the balcony watching golf on his iPad, probably like during a test match, probably also amplifies that. This is not an innocent situation that I was just walking along minding my own business. I slipped and fell into a golf bag and I came out playing a luscious chip out of the bunker to land it right next to the pin on the 7th. That's not what happened.
Yeah, there are a lot of examples. And there was a big newspaper feature on England and golf this week as well, which probably didn't help the situation. And last thing on this thread is that England have changed up their data program. So as we have talked about many times, Nathan Lehman, who was credited as being one of the architects of their 2019 World Cup win under Owen Morgan, that really tight relationship with Nathan Lehman and Morgan, they've moved him on. And Freddie Wild, who we've had on the show many times, who was the white ball analyst, he's been moved on as well. So the belief, according to the reports in Tim Wigmore's exclusive story in the Telegraph, this comes from a belief that data works in franchise cricket and it doesn't work in international cricket. Who are we to judge? But it is a break on what they've done before, a big departure on that. And I don't know what that means. Does that mean they return to? They've got one guy now doing both roles, and so the idea is they'll declutter their dressing room as well. Or maybe it'll just be vibes, man. Who knows? Maybe it'll be about, your approach to the 16th in the way that they're trying to reject at the moment.
It seems fitting. I think there is something to be said for that, in that it's probably more big tournament games, though. Like there's that sense that the analytics stuff stops mattering in a final. I don't know that it stops mattering in a group stage, that kind of thing, particularly when you have things like net run rate considerations and, okay, we're going to need to chase this in 14 overs. What's our best way to do that? Like, what's the most likely way in terms of the resources we have? Who's going to bowl for them? How many overs are they going to bowl? Who's going to bowl 3? Who's going to bowl 2? When are they going to bowl them? And who do we have facing up to them? That's the kind of situation where I would want that data analysis to say, here's who should open, rather than doing a gut feel of, why don't we chuck old mate at number 7 up to open and have a swing? Who's best suited to do that against the bowlers that they're going to start with, that kind of thing.
Yeah, to me, it's just interesting that they've gone in one direction quite strongly and now they're pivoting. So
they're just basically they're saying we're sick of being told what to do by a bunch of nerds. So why don't you fellas fuck off and write a book or something? Oh, you already did, whatever. Go and write another one. And we'll get on with the business of winning games. Thanks.
Speaking about of the bloke who wrote the book, Ben Jones is coming up in segment 3. He wrote a book with Nathan Lehman about this very topic. We'll be back in a moment. Final word, segment 3. It begins with Odin Mortgage and Tax. Jeff, with us for April and May, for expats like you and me, for people who occasionally need to work out what the fuck they're doing with their tax and if they want to have a mortgage or if they want to sort out their financial arrangements in Australia before returning home whilst living abroad. Jeff, I've nearly got to the front of the Melbourne Cricket Club membership list. I signed up on Boxing Day in 2008, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
I've often wondered what happens when my number comes up, because I know that I signed my form at the same time as the PM at the time. Will he take up his offer? Does he reply to the MCC's emails saying, here's my change of address here, or because he's an ambassador these days? Does he write back and say, here's my
address? They've got the
international
international membership. He can use the international membership, which,
so
which
can I.
You have to reactivate when you enter the country.
As I've learnt during the week, so can I. I changed my address on the waiting list, and I found out that I've got access to this thing, which reminded me of Odin Mortgage and Tax. About when you're away from home, there are various things that can tick over if you don't have yourself set up properly. And if
you're not set up properly, you'll be paying full freight.
That's right.
For a membership that you can't use very much, because you don't know that there's an international membership that you can use, or an interstate membership that you can use. You've got to have the ins and the outs. So it is important to know what's going on. And it is tax time in Australia. I mean, really October's tax time, but if you've got an agent, then it would have been in the last week or so. For May to do the one from the previous, I always get confused with financial years. This is why you need someone who understands what a financial year is. The very fact they put it in the middle of the year, that ruins it for me. I have no idea what is going on, when I've done a return, what it's for, what country it was in. That's why you need the professionals.
$300 to get their tax service, and they'll review your finances and make sure that bit's ticking over. The mortgage consultation is free. This is especially relevant to when you're thinking about what you might be doing back in Australia. And I know from experience that's pretty stressful with a 10-hour time difference and that type of thing. So Odin Mortgage and Tax, their link is in our episode description today. Send you to a Final Word landing page, and then please tell them that we sent you.